Now, with this situation, I've been trying to look at it from a reputation standpoint. Matchroom have long had a reputation of being easy come, easy go with fighters. With many fighters over the years, they've had no written contract. It's all a one fight deal basis, like with Tony Bellew, like with Dylan White, and several others. But with certain fighters, they've had multi-fight deals. Okay, and up until this point, to my knowledge, Matchroom had never been in a situation where they're potentially pursuing legal action with one of their fighters who wants to leave. Frank Warren has been involved in those situations many times. And I think that's why so many people, that's one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons why so many fighters were quick to sign with Matchroom. They were quick to jump ship once Matchroom got going and they had that Sky deal and leave Frank Warren, join Eddie Hearn, because Hearn had a reputation among fighters of treating you well and being easy come, easy go. This situation with Lawrence Okolie, regardless of who you think is in the right or in the wrong, is not a good visual for Matchroom. Yeah? Now, with regards to the way the fans have reacted to it, many of them, yes, have sided with Eddie Hearn for several reasons. First of all, they saw Eddie Hearn giving Lawrence Okolie that Sky Dweller. He had said to Lawrence Okolie that if he won a world title, he'd buy him this Rolex, and he was a man of his word, he did it. And that cost like 40 bags, right? 40 grand or whatever. So people look at that and they think, wow, Hearn doing stuff for his fighters that he doesn't have to do, giving them gifts, 40 grand gifts, right? Then you've got the fact that, according to Eddie Hearn, he's actually lost money on several Lawrence Okolie shows. Lawrence Okolie has put in several soporific performances where the fans haven't been entertained, where there's been a lot of holding and all this kind of thing. But yet Eddie Hearn was still doing his job as a promoter, paying him apparently good money, etc., etc. So when Lawrence Okolie then comes out with a tweet comparing Eddie Hearn to Leonardo DiCaprio's character in the film Django, the fans look at that and think, whoa, that's off. That's really off. There's someone who hasn't been a big ticket seller for Matchroom, but has still apparently been paid well and been given these gifts, is coming out and insinuating that Eddie Hearn is like DiCaprio's character in Django. I mean, whoa, that's somebody who seems ungrateful. This is how a lot of fans have seen it. And particularly in this current climate where there's a certain amount of, or more than a certain amount of, how can I describe it? Weaponized victimhood. And a lot of people are sick of it. When Okolie comes out and says something like that, it really riles people up because of that as well. Not just the situation between him and Eddie Hearn, but the wider context in the current socio-political climate. Hope I didn't say socio-economic, socio-political climate in the wider context, right? So, yeah, I can understand why people have taken Eddie Hearn's side rather than Lawrence Okolie's side. But in this interview here, Lawrence Okolie revealed the fact that he was actually gagged. So while Eddie Hearn was able to get on interviews and give his side of the story with regards to Lawrence Okolie, Okolie wasn't allowed to give his side. He was sent, according to him, letters by Matchroom saying, if you speak to the media or you say anything about this situation, you'll be sued. That's pretty dirty, right? When one side, as in Eddie Hearn, can speak, but the fighter can't speak. And you can understand, and Lawrence Okolie said that was going on for several months prior to him putting that tweet out about Eddie Hearn. So when you see the full context of it, yeah, it wasn't a good tweet to put out. Don't get it twisted. It wasn't a good tweet to put out. But you can definitely see why a fighter would be frustrated when he's being told you're not allowed to speak. We'll sue you if you speak. But then the other side is speaking. That's going to be a frustrating situation. Now, according to Lawrence Okolie, his contract came to an end. And he was negotiating with Matchroom for a new contract. And in the midst of negotiating with Matchroom, he was approached by Ben Shalom. And they offered him a deal. He then went to Matchroom and said, look, I've been offered this money. You don't have to match it, but if you just get close to it, I'll stay with you. This is what Lawrence Okolie said. According to him, Matchroom said they wouldn't get close to it. And so Lawrence Okolie said, okay, no problem. I'll go sign with Ben Shalom. He was then told, oh, no, you're not going to sign with Ben Shalom because you've still got one fight left with us. And if you want to go without having that fight, then you need to buy your way out of the contract. It's going to cost you 500 grand, right? $500,000. At this point, Lawrence Okolie said he sought legal advice because as far as he was aware, there was no more fights left on his contract. Now, he was supposed to fight Krzysztof Glowacki and the fight was rescheduled. And in the meantime, he had a tick-over. And that tick-over, as far as Lawrence Okolie was concerned, counted towards the number of fights he was supposed to have on his contract. Let's, for argument's sake, say it was a 10-fight contract. That fight would have, in Lawrence Okolie's mind, counted in part of that 10-fight deal. And I'm not saying that was the exact number of fights they had on the deal. I'm just coming up with an arbitrary figure because I don't know the actual figure. But Matchroom have basically, according to Okolie, said, no, that fight didn't count. That fight was separate to your Matchroom contract. But Okolie is arguing that he never signed anything. He never signed a separate contract. He never agreed to have this fight not included within his contracted fights. So this is where the dispute is. And he says that he's been to several different lawyers, the 258 management lawyers, independent lawyers. And he says they've all said the same thing. You don't have any more fights left on your contract and Matchroom are wrong. And Lawrence Okolie in this interview seems to claim or at least insinuate that Matchroom have also acknowledged that he doesn't have any more fights left on his contract. So I don't know what's going on there, why Matchroom publicly are saying that he does, but Lawrence Okolie is saying that he doesn't. I don't know. You see, the thing with Eddie Hearn is that he tries to be very clever with words. And at the moment, he's saying that him and Lawrence disagree on the number of fights he has left on his contract. Before, he was saying that Lawrence definitely has one fight left on his contract. But now he's saying that he disagrees. Now, is that just Eddie Hearn being more diplomatic because of the fact that him and Lawrence have actually spoken now? They had a big talk, long talk on the phone, apparently, according to both of them. And that Hearn now wants to be a bit more diplomatic rather than being combative. Is that what it is? Or is it because behind the scenes, he has actually conceded and there isn't any more fights? I don't know. Also, Eddie Hearn has spoken about how, during this whole situation, Lawrence could have just gone to the Matchroom offices, sat down in front of him, and they could have talked it out. Lawrence Okolie says he tried to do that several times, but he wasn't able to get to Eddie Hearn directly. There was always some intermediary. They were always putting someone in between him and Eddie Hearn. And he said he found that very frustrating. So, again, you guys go watch the interview for yourselves. It's on IFL TV. He's also done an interview with, I think, at least one other YouTube channel with regards to this situation. In any event, his mandatory challenger has now been put upon him, right? The mandatory's been called. And that may sort the situation out without them having to go to court. That might be the reason that they're both coming out talking now, because they know that if this mandatory situation goes ahead, then it's going to resolve the situation and it's going to resolve the dispute between them anyway. Because if the two sides can't agree a deal between, Lawrence Okolie's team and his opponent's team, then it will go to purse bids, and whoever wins the bid will get to stage the fight. I said in a previous video, as I understand it, if the other side win the purse bid rather than Matchroom, then Lawrence Okolie might still have to pay a percentage of his purse to Eddie Hearn. Again, I don't know what the contracts are, but my understanding of many fighters' contracts over the years, again, as an outsider, is that in some cases at least, even when they go to fight on a different promoter's show, they have to pay their own promoter a percentage. So it might be less than if that promoter was putting on the show, I don't know, but they have to pay them something. So, yeah, that's the situation. According to Lawrence Okolie, we've heard from Eddie Hearn. One last point I have to make is Hearn saying that justifying not allowing Lawrence Okolie to go was based upon losing so much money from Lawrence Okolie over the years. Right? He said that he lost money on several of his shows. And so the logical thing to ask Matchroom would be, why do you want to retain him then for one more fight? That's just one more fight that you're going to lose money on. Isn't it better to just cut him loose so you won't lose money once again? It's not like this mandatory challenger he's about to fight is some household name where you're going to be able to pack out an arena and, make a load, are you? So why not just cut him loose? It seems, again, as an outsider looking in, to be personal between Eddie Hearn and Lawrence Okolie. Now, of course, with Lawrence Okolie putting out that tweet, you could understand Eddie Hearn taking offense and getting personal over that. But according to Lawrence Okolie, he says that Matchroom were being really difficult with him prior to that, not allowing him to leave and, putting a gagging order on him and all this kind of stuff, not allowing him to speak or threatening him with legal action if he does speak. Perhaps gagging order is not the right term, I don't know. But according to Lawrence Okolie, he was threatened with legal action if he spoke to any of the media about the situation. So what's all that about? Why would they do that? I'd like to hear from Eddie Hearn with regards to that. And as I said at the start, fighters are going to look at this differently to the fans. The fans may look at it and say, Lawrence Okolie's ungrateful. He's been boring over the years. Eddie Hearn, has done so much for him and he rescued him from McDonald's and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, fans are going to see it that way, a certain amount of fans. But trust me when I tell you this, a lot of fighters won't see it that way. A lot of fighters, because they're out for their bottom line. They know that the promoters are out for or a lot of fighters understand that the promoters are out for their bottom line. All this talk about loyalty is a load of rubbish. If you're not bringing in the money, if you're not winning, if your career is going downwards rather than upwards, then all of a sudden the promoter's not calling you. All of a sudden the promoter is not putting you on so many shows. Just like Lawrence Okolie said in the interview, Eddie Hearn is not doing this for charity. He's a businessman. And if he doesn't see value in a fighter or potential value in a fighter, then there isn't going to be any phone calls. There isn't going to be that many opportunities. The fighter might get used as an opponent in some instances, right? So, that is what that is. But hopefully this situation can all be resolved now with the mandatory that's been called and everybody can move on with their careers. But as I say, a lot of fighters in the industry are going to look at this, now, especially now that Lawrence Okolie has spoken out publicly. They're going to look at this and it's going to change their perception of Eddie Hearn for the worse. Whether you think that's right or wrong, I'm telling you that's going to happen. He had a certain reputation and particularly in the UK, right? The boxing community is very tight-knit. Word gets around quickly. And so people are now going to be looking, and Hearn is in a position at this stage where he needs to be endearing himself to as many young fighters as possible and start signing some new talent, the next generation of talent. They seem to be all going elsewhere. Maybe he feels like Ben Shalom and Frank Warren are going to lose some of the fighters as time goes on. Well, perhaps. But maybe they won't lose some of the better fighters, We'll see how it goes. But when you're in a competitive market, the way Matchroom are, at least in the UK, very competitive, and in America, very competitive, you can't afford to be seen threatening fighters legally. I'm talking about fighters who have been with you for a number of years, fighters that you've signed right, on your books. You can't afford to be seen to be threatening them with legal action if they talk, preventing them from leaving at the end of their contracts, and all this kind of thing. Yeah. Now, some fighters, of course, will side with Eddie Hearn, for whatever reason. But plenty of other fighters are going to look at this and say, nah, I don't like the way Hearn acted in this situation here. My perception of him has changed. And that's going to, of course, benefit the other promoters, particularly Ben Shalom. With Frank Warren, he's been in legal situations with many, many fighters over the years. But Ben Shalom to date, as far as I'm aware, hasn't been involved in any messy divorces because he hasn't been around long enough, right? So that potentially could benefit him. Let's see what happens. Give me your thoughts in the comment section below.
If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalog of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.